Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Black Mirror Season 4, Episode 3, Crocodile. This video is part of a series of videos where I review Season 4 of Black Mirror, one episode at a time. So I have to give a spoiler warning for Crocodile. If you haven't seen this episode, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. However, I will not spoil any other episodes of Black Mirror, so if you haven't seen all of Black Mirror, you don't have to worry about spoilers, provided you have seen Crocodile. So I'll just start with a bold statement, and I'm just going to put it right out there. This is my favorite episode of Season 4 of Black Mirror. Now that may surprise many, and I know a lot may disagree, but that's how I feel, so I'm just going to say it. Now, generally speaking, opinions on which Black Mirror episodes are good and which ones aren't vary wildly from person to person. That's actually the great thing about Black Mirror, that each episode is so different. They will appeal to different opinions and tastes, and some people may hate episodes that I love and love episodes that I hate, more so than most other shows. But that being said, the general consensus on Season 4 is that the poor episodes of the season are Archangel, Crocodile, and Metalhead, and the strong episodes of the season are USS Callister, Hang the DJ, and Black Museum. Now, that does appear to be the general consensus for everything I've saw and read online and everything. While many would place Metalhead as the worst episode of the season, I have seen many, including my brother, place this episode, Crocodile, as the worst of the season. But as I said, opinions vary wildly. I have seen some people place Black Museum as the worst episode of the season, and even a few who agree with me that Crocodile is the best of the season. But that opinion does appear to be in the minority, but not that I would ever let that influence my opinion or pretend that this isn't the case, because my opinion just doesn't so happen to match up with popular opinion. As I stated before, there was only one episode of Season 4 I thought was subpar, and I covered that last week, and it was Archangel. So the rest of the episodes I do think are great from one degree to another, but I'll cover the other episodes in other videos. As for Crocodile, since there's been a lot of criticism leveled at this episode, criticism that I obviously disagree with, some of this review will be me addressing some of those complaints and stating why I don't necessarily agree. So, Black Mirror is known as being a bleak and depressing show, and this episode, in my opinion, just barely beats out White Christmas as the most depressing and disturbing episode the show has ever done. After I watched this episode, I just wanted to curl up into a ball on the floor and cry myself to sleep. So it may be a tad masochistic of me to consider this the best episode of the season, but to me, a story that is so powerful that it makes me feel emotions to such a strong degree is an indicator that it is excellent storytelling. The episode begins with a scene that indicates its dark tone perfectly, where two lovers after a rave accidentally hit and kill a man on a bike and then dump the body to hide that death. I felt this was the perfect way to begin the episode, in the way that it perfectly played the realism of the situation in the way that it felt like it could really happen. As we all made mistakes in our lives, and I personally had heard many stories from people who were careless after they partied too hard. So it's not hard to imagine a careless couple accidentally killing a man and wanting to hide this fact so it doesn't ruin their lives. This is, in fact, sets the tone for the rest of the episode. The lengths people will go to protect their lives and not have things change. This is a theme I totally completely buy, and one I thought was executed in a great and totally believable way. Also, I do have to point out how brilliantly I thought the crash itself was filmed, as it gave you the perspective of Rob and Mia that they didn't even show the biker until after he was hit, and he did appear to come out of nowhere, which of course he didn't. It was just Rob wasn't paying any attention, but it puts you into that perspective. So it is interesting to note that Mia was initially against hiding the body, and she wanted to call the police. It was in fact Rob who insisted on hiding the body and throwing it off a cliff into the water, never to be found. I think that is an interesting distinction to make going forward, because we then flash forward to 15 years in the future, where Mia has become a wealthy architect. She's married and has a son, and they live in a beautiful house and are doing very well for themselves. And you really get the sense that she is living her idyllic lifestyle, her paradise, if you will. Whereas Rob has had a much rougher time, who apparently is not doing so well and is just recovering from alcoholism. So there's a couple of things that make this moment in time different than the 15 years previous, where apparently Rob and Mia had no problems keeping the manslaughter that they committed secret. First off, we see that Mia has had a much better time moving on and wiping the event from her mind, whereas Rob has had a much harder time, as living with the guilt has apparently led him to alcoholism. So this could be because Rob was the one who was mainly responsible, as it was his insistence that they hide the death, and he, after all, was the one driving the car. Whereas Mia may have felt more pressured into it, and perhaps it was easier for her to live with the guilt or convince herself it wasn't really her fault. So when we catch up with them 15 years later, Rob is a complete and total mess who let his guilt consume him, and Mia has managed to put the whole incident completely out of her mind. In fact, when Rob visits her again, she doesn't even want to talk about it at all, but Rob, of course, insists that they do. So as I said, there's a couple specific reasons why this comes up at this time in particular. For one, Rob has recently entered a 12-step program to become sober, and has he mentioned part of 12-step programs is making good for the people that he's wronged in the past. So it seems obvious that there would be, this would be the thing that's weighing most on his mind. Secondly, Rob found the article about the wife of the man he killed and how she's still looking for him and she hasn't moved on, and because she just thinks that he's missing, which would of course increase his guilt and give him further incentives to come clean about it in order to give her closure. However, for Rob, his life was completely destroyed by this incident, and he feels overwhelmed by guilt about having ruined this woman's life. But for Mia, it's completely different. She doesn't feel as much guilt about it, as she blames Rob more than herself, and she has made something of her life. And in short, she has a lot more to protect. She has this perfect life that could be ruined because of somebody else's mistake. And let me just say, the acting in this whole episode is absolutely superb. I'm sorry, you're going to hear me rant and praise the acting in this episode throughout this review. But Andrea Riseborough, who plays Mia, does a particularly exceptional job in this scene. That she does such a great job playing how desperate she is to keep Rob from ruining her perfect life, and how her entire life, her entire world hangs in the balance. So it was the most believable thing in the world to me that she was so desperate to stop him. She starts by saying, "Oh no, let's just talk about it." But the underlining motivation is to prevent him from leaving, prevent him from telling everyone. So when he doesn't listen to her and all her tactics fails, the heat of the moment gets her, and she ends up attacking him, which then leads to her strangling him, which leads to her killing him. And now, let me address one of the most common complaints I heard about this episode, and it's one I could not disagree with more, and that is that the character motivations felt unbelievable and fake. Not just in this scene, but throughout the episode. And I actually think the exact opposite. The reason why I love this episode is because the motivations to me seem entirely realistic and believable. The basic motivation underlying Mina's actions here is her perfect life and wanting to protect that. In fact, this is something you see a lot in movies and shows, that a main character's main motivation is to protect their family. Typically it's done in a positive way, but it's interesting here to flip that on its side. And of course her main motivation isn't to protect her family per se, but her life with them. Something that is apparently more important than anything. So I find it completely believable that she'd do anything, even kill, to protect that. The other aspect being that she went 15 years with basically getting away with manslaughter, and it is a proven tenet of human nature that when you get away with something, doing it again becomes easier. And she spent 15 years with the knowledge that she basically got away with murder. So I totally buy this would give her an attitude that if she can do it once, she can do it again. And the rest of the episode is a classic example of one thing leading to another, where she started with accidentally manslaughter, which led to a murder in the heat of anger, and that led to abducting a woman and then more coldly considering killing her, and then that led to a home invasion, a pre-calculated homicide, and then that led to killing an infant. And I totally and completely bought this journey. In fact, would say that the way it played out was beautifully constructed, as it was a classic example of one step leading to another and how things can escalate. In fact, there are many films that are examples of this, such as Shallow Grave or Very Bad Things, although this episode decidedly takes a more serious and darker tone. I actually think this is the best and most believable example of those kinds of stories, and I'm most definitely the most tragic. Another common complaint I hear about this episode is that the viewer didn't really connect or relate to the main characters involved. And again, I very strongly disagree, or at least I had a different personal experience. I thought the progression of Mia's storyline made her a really relatable character, as she made an understandable mistake that's really human thing to do, and then the lengths she goes to protect her family life and the life that she where she is admired, and where she's this perfect life for her. And so that's something that's actually I find really relatable. Granted, many audience members would find it hard to imagine killing people in cold blood, especially a baby, at least I would hope so. But the underlying motivation of wanting to protect your life is something extremely relatable. I mean, imagine if someone came to take your family away from you for a mistake that you made 15 years ago. I know the easy response would be, well, if I killed someone, then I deserve it. But things aren't that simple. And putting yourself in the mindset of this woman, I can absolutely relate to the journey that she goes through. And I also completely and totally relate to Shazia's character journey as well, as she also has a family to protect, a husband and a child, and she's just trying to do her job to earn money to support them, and it accidentally leads her into this other woman's tragic situation. And the tragedy involved is just so rich and wonderfully executed. I love how the episode introduced Shazia's character fairly earlier on and follows her for a while, so you can see the kind of relationship that she has with her caring husband and the child that they are caring for. That just makes the tragic ending so much more powerful, and plus at first you're wondering how Shazia's storyline will intercept Mia's storyline, as you know it will happen, so it's fascinating to see the two parallel stories come together. I heard one reviewer say they thought the episode would be better if they didn't even follow Mia at all and did the whole episode from Shazia's perspective. And my God, I don't know if I ever disagreed with anyone's criticism of a show more than I disagree with that statement. This episode is infinitely better for having followed both perspectives. I mean, It follows Mia's journey into madness as one thing leads to another. Is by far the best thing about this episode, as it really sets it apart. If it did simply just follow Shazaya the whole time, this would make it more of a stereotypical murder mystery like CSI or Luther or whatever. And this episode is so much more than that. It is a unique, dark character tragedy, and all of this would have been lost if you just cut out half of the perspective of the episode. Which leads me to another complaint I heard that I could not possibly disagree with more, and that is that this episode, as is more like a generic murder mystery like CSI or Luther. And again, it's not Black Mirror enough. Whereas in my opinion, this is the most Black Mirror episode of Black Mirror that ever Black Mirrored, and you couldn't get more Black Mirror-y than this. It's an ultra depressing, ultra disturbing story about speculative technology and how it relates to crime, and that is essentially what makes Black Mirror Black Mirror. In fact, as I was watching this episode, I remember specifically thinking when I got to this episode that this was the first episode of the season that had that signature Black Mirror feel to it. If there's any episode that felt just like a generic CSI episode, it would be season 3's Hated in the Nation, which is why I just thought that episode was okay. So getting more specifically to the technology, another complaint I heard is that the episode didn't have a specific message about the technology. It was kind of just there. However, Black Mirror doesn't always have to have a specific message about technology. And no, it wasn't just there. It did in fact play a very important role in this episode. Showrunner Charlie Brooker even noted that sometimes people misread the intention of the show, that is about how bad technology is, when it isn't the intention to be all about how worse these technologies will make people's lives, but more of how bad people are and what are the ways they can misuse technology to make the world a more horrible place. In fact, I think the way this episode uses the memory recall technology is absolutely brilliant. First of all, this technology is less advanced than the grain technology as seen in the first season episode, The Entire History of You. That was like having a camera inside your head that recorded everything you saw. You could go back and watch these objective events on what occurred. Here, nothing is being recorded, and it's about recalling what one remembers. Therefore, the memory recall device is very subjective depending on what one remembers, which is very dependent on one's own perception. Therefore, it isn't objective like the grain. This, I think, was illustrated beautifully in the scene where the dentist is recalling the events of the accident, and he said the girl's coat was green, but when Shazaya corrected him that it was yellow, the image of her coat on screen changed from green to yellow. Also in the memory of the lad hit by the pizza truck, the other woman he saw there he thought was quite attractive, and so she looked very attractive in his memories. However, when Shazaya actually went to visit her, she was more ordinary looking, not as colorful, has indicated how memory changes someone's appearance. I love subtle touches like that. I think it was amazing. So in the episode, the memory recall device was being used by insurance agents to verify claims. This does seem like something insurance companies would do to ensure claims are valid. It also seems like this technology would be used in police work as well, which indeed is indicated by the ending of the episode that it is in fact used by law enforcement. However, the episode itself, we see more from the insurance agent's perspective, so we don't really get into how law enforcement uses it that much. So, since it is subject to one's own personal perception, that is why they interview as many people as they can to get a full picture. This is, in fact, what contemporary investigators do, and why police get statements from as many witnesses as they can, because people's memories are subjective. However, the device allows them a much fuller picture than simply people relating verbally what they remember, where here investigators can actually see what they remember. Even if it is still subject to unreliable memory, it still paints a clearer picture than what can be done with words. For example, we see Shazaya is able to copy and paste images of people brought up from these memories and search for them on the net to find them, which would be incredibly helpful, rather than having to say, like, get a sketch artist to try to sketch out what somebody looks like from memory. Here you just see it on the video screen and you instantly have their picture. So how it's used in the episode is of vital importance because it does in fact impact greatly Mia's story, as without the memory device, Mia's story would likely end with her killing Rob. But because of an unrelated insurance investigation involving an unrelated accident to which Mia just so happened to witness immediately after having committed homicide, it ends up tying into her investigation. So because Shazaya's investigation, she comes across the dentist who saw Mia in the window, and she's able to take her image from his memory in order to find her. And once she does, she wants to use the device on her. This, of course, leads Shazaya to uncovering more than she bargained for, which puts her life in danger, as Mia now wants to kill her too in order to cover up her crime. But then Mia uses the device on Shazaya to find out if she told anyone else where she was going, and this betrays her, as Mia not only kills her but goes to her house and kills her husband and child as well. So the device does in fact play a pivotal role in this episode. However, as I mentioned before, true to Broker's words, the memory recall device is neither presented as a good or bad thing, just showing how it could affect things. From one perspective, you could say it's a good thing because without it, Mia would have gotten away with murder and thus would never be held accountable for her crimes. But on the other hand, you could call it a bad thing, as Shazaya and her family would still be alive had it not been for this device. So I actually think this is incredibly brilliant, as instead of preaching to you, this device is great or this device is evil, the episode simply presents what effect it has, so it leaves it up to you to decide, does a device like this better society or does it make it worse? And I love that. So what's also interesting about the device is how Mia tries to cheat it, kind of like a lie detector test, but we see that this doesn't go so well. Before she undergoes the procedure, we see her repeating the mantra of that she was alone, she ordered room service, and she was watching porn. She just keeps repeating these things to herself over and over again to try to make this the memories that the device reads. What's also interesting is that before she agrees to use the device, we see her eyeing the set of kitchen knives, which is a brilliant, very subtle touch that shows that she's contemplating killing Shazaya, but instead she tries her hand at cheating the device. So when Shazaya presents the beer for her to sniff like she did to the other people, she outright refuses because she doesn't want to have her memories refreshed. She just wants these fake memories to come up. But then Shazaya plays the music, which she can do nothing about. Now, I also love how Shazaya uses smell and music to strengthen memory recall, because we do know that music can often bring up memories to the forefront and make them stronger. So at first, when Shazaya is scanning Mia's mind, she just sees the food and the porn because that's what Mia is trying to think about. And then Shazaya says that she just needs the accident. But then she says, think to what you were doing just before the accident. And what Mia was really doing just before the accident was killing Rob. So this gets to the old saying of when someone tells you not to think of an elephant, what do you think of? An elephant. So when Shazaya told Mia to think of what she was doing just before the accident, she probably tried her hardest not to, but trying not to, that actually brings up the images. And I absolutely love how the images flash, like really random. This makes total sense of how the mind would jump from image to image, especially when Mia is trying not to remember those things. She's trying to just think of the accident, which is why in the images it keeps coming back to the accident, which is brilliant because that's what she's trying to think of, but the other images keep coming to her even though she doesn't want them to. So again, it was an amazingly acted scene. Once Shazia saw the murder, she knew she was in danger, so she tried to get out of there as quick as she could, but also at the same time trying to pretend that everything's fine. And this is amazing acting of someone trying to pretend to feel one thing but failing, and you can see how she's panicking but trying to hide the panic. And then Mia's acting is equally amazing on how she can tell that Shazia saw something that she shouldn't have, and you can see her trying to make up her mind until finally she comes to the decision that she can't let Shazia leave. And the moment she picked up that rock and started smashing down her window was a truly horrific scene. And the next scene where Mia has Shazia tied up was another absolutely brilliantly acted scene. As you can tell, Mia is trying to find an excuse not to kill Shazia, and Shazia is trying desperately to give her that excuse. Like when Shazia says that she's legally not allowed to tell anyone what she saw in her memory, we know that that is a lie, because earlier when she was talking to the dentist, she said if she saw a memory of him harming himself or another person, she'd be obligated to go to law enforcement, which makes a lot of sense. So once Mia sees the memory of her telling her husband where she was going, she comes to the decision that she must kill them both. So this was really thrilling and disturbing. One of the most emotionally powerful scenes I've seen all year, in my opinion. So then we get the absolutely heart-wrenching scene of Mia breaking into Shazia's home to kill her husband. And this was one of the most raw and disturbing scenes I've ever seen of this kind. And again, it's totally believable because you can see how one thing leads to another. And also, there's the sunk cost fallacy, which I think really factors in here as well. So if you're not familiar with the term sunk cost fallacy, it refers to the line of thinking that you've already put a lot of investment into something, therefore you should not give up on that course. This term is used a lot with gamblers. After they lost a lot of money gambling, they figure they need to make it worthwhile, so they should keep gambling until they regain their money or gain some money for it. But of course, life doesn't always work that way. So I think this totally factors in the home invasion scene, as she already committed to killing Rob, to killing Shazia, so to give up now would be letting go of her sunk cost. And again, this scene was acted amazingly well, with some great cinematography to boot. But the scene where Mia approaches Shazia's husband in the tub was done so well. As you can see the moment of hesitation, of cracks in Mia's resolve, you can tell inside her head something is screaming at her not to do it. And in fact, you can pick out the specific moments where she almost turns around. But then her phone goes off, so he sees her, so she panics, and it's done. It's so human, it's so convincing, it's so disturbing, and it is just really well done. And then she hears the baby squealing. When this happened, my heart just stopped. I don't know about you, but I just had this huge weight in my stomach. Surely she wouldn't kill the baby. Surely she wouldn't go that far. But sure enough, she does. And I do give a lot of credit to the show for not actually showing us that. And to be clear, I totally bought it as well. As I said, the sunk cost fallacy. She's not just going to go as far as to not kill the baby and thus render all of her other sunk costs meaningless. Protect, all the stuff that she did to protect her perfect life. And other than sunk costs is also the notion of the more you do something, the easier it becomes. And so I totally bought that killing would be relatively easy for her at this point. So again, totally bought it. But then, of course, we get the huge irony spike of the episode, where we discover that the baby was in fact blind. So it was totally unnecessary for her to kill him. But more to the point, the police used the memory recall device on the guinea pig to find out who killed the baby. So the big irony here is, had she left the baby alone, she would have gotten away with it, because the guinea pig would have never seen her, and the baby was blind, so it doesn't matter about the baby. Now, I do buy that she wouldn't consider the guinea pig, because it has been established that this technology is fairly new, and she's not exactly sure how it works. Also, I heard others being highly critical of the notion that the memory recall device could be used on a guinea pig, but I totally disagree, because they also could try to use smell or sound to ignite the guinea pig's memory, and all they need is a simple image. That's all they need. And believe you me, animals do have memories. I had cats and dogs I hadn't seen in years that instantly recognized me. But as for the irony here, I do have mixed feelings about this, because on the one, it's actually really cool, and it does show that Mia is not a professional killer. Even though she's doing her best to cover her tracks, it makes total sense that she wouldn't know exactly what to cover, as she's doing all this in kind of a hurry, and so wouldn't have the time to familiarize herself with police procedure. But on the other hand, it does seem kind of like a shoehorned in, like a guy who likes to read having his seeing eyeglasses broken kind of irony moment. And it wasn't all that necessary for the story, and the story would have been fine without it. And I'm talking specifically about the baby being blind part, not the guinea pig bit. The guinea pig bit you need, but the baby being blind, that did seem kind of like a way to scream, irony, irony! But still, on some level, I do really like it. So as I said, I have mixed feelings about it. Also, there's been some discussion on what kind of rodent it is. I think it's a guinea pig, but it might be a hamster. It's hard to gauge the size because we don't really get a sense of scale. But one thing I'm absolutely certain about it, that it is not a gerbil. I heard some people refer to it as a gerbil, and I've had gerbils before. They are not that size. They are less chubby. They're more slender, kind of like a mouse, but slightly bigger. So definitely not a gerbil. But then again, maybe it is a hamster and people are getting annoyed at me for calling it a guinea pig, so whatever. Anyway, I absolutely positively loved the final scene at the kids' recital. That was the perfect way to end the episode. Now, I heard some people say that we're not sure if the police actually caught Mia or not, but that objectively is not the case. This episode made it very clear that that is indeed what happened. As the show, they show the thing with the guinea pig, and then the police show up at the play, and we see officers talking to people who specifically point to Mia. And remember, there's absolutely positively nothing tying Mia to Shazia's family except for the guinea pig, so there's no reason for the police to be storming the play and looking for her, except that they know that she committed the murders. Anyway, this scene is another example of Mia's great acting. It was absolutely superb seeing her watch the play, as the guilt of everything she just did was finally hitting her, and it was performed beautifully. I mean, this episode has so many great examples of non-dialogue, just silent facial expression acting that is so deep and complex and so impressive. What was even greater is when the play ends and everyone's cheering and she's clapping, but at the corner of her eyes, she sees the police coming for her. So she knows that she's fucked. She knows that she failed. She knows that she is about to lose everything that she was so desperate to protect, and thus the fallacy of sunk cost comes back to bite her in the ass, as it tends to do. And her reaction as she continues to clap and pretend everything's okay, as she realizes her life is about to end. And in fact, I think part of her is probably glad, because she realized how far that she went by killing all those people. And this comes off so perfectly. All these dynamics, all these complexities comes off so perfectly in her reactions. And this was very powerful, very disturbing episode. The way it ends with a cut to a happy tune. I love that. I absolutely love that. When this is pulled off so effectively, where we get the contrast of one of the most disturbing stories that I've ever witnessed being closed off by a happy tune. The contrast of this just makes the entire thing hit so much harder. It is brilliant. Anyway, let me get into a bit of the Easter eggs. And there were a couple of Easter eggs in this episode that I noticed, all my own, the very first time I watched this episode without anyone having to point it out to me. And the one huge one is the song that appeared in 15 Million Merits that was sung at the Hot Shots competition. And it was also sung by the military woman to taunt a witness in the episode Men Against Fire. And apparently, although I don't remember this reference, it was also sung at a karaoke in the episode White Christmas. And the song was the one Shazai used to spark everyone's memories of the accident. And there was also the porn Mia was watching in her hotel room to make it appear that she was there all night. When she was selecting porn, she scanned past the Wraith Babes, which is the porn in 15 Million Merits where the protagonist's love interest is forced into, and the one that he kept saying ads for throughout that episode. Those were the ones I noticed, but apparently a hotel clerk also mentions a scandal at the hotel involving Hotshot judges, and Hot Shots is of course the singing contest show from 15 Million Merits. But as I said, I'll get more into these Easter eggs in another video. So my rating for Crocodile out of 10 is a 10, the best. I don't care what anyone else says. This is my favorite episode of Season 4. It is one of my favorite episodes of the entire show. I don't want to get into what that says about me, but really this had one of the biggest emotional impacts on me and really made me contemplate and really affected my life after watching this episode. I heard some other people talk about how they watched the next episode immediately after watching this one. Honestly, I don't know how they did it, as I needed a day to let this sink in before I could watch anything else. As I said, I completely disagree with the complaints that the characters were either unbelievable or unrelatable, as I thought this episode did a brilliant job of making this extremely believable and relatable, to the point I'd say this had one of the strongest sense of realism in the entire series, and the way they used the technology was absolutely brilliant. I love how the episode isn't telling you what to think of the technology and is more of just presenting some possible effects that it could have, leaving you with things to ponder. In fact, there's a lot of subtle subtext in this episode that is amazing to pick apart on repeat viewings and adds to the overall texture of the story. So I actually appreciated this episode more on repeat viewings, and those are by far my favorite kinds of TV episodes and films to watch, the ones that you can watch repeatedly and get more out of. The acting is absolutely brilliant and the story is beautifully disturbing. So that's it for my review of Crocodile. I'll be back here next week to review episode 4 of Black Mirror as I continue to review all of season 4 one episode at a time. So be sure to keep an eye out for that, as well as many other videos I do on other shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, The Expanse, Discovery, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.